Light can be described through four basic properties. When you want to describe what a light is like and how you want it to behave, you can use these four basic properties. And those four basic properties are the brightness or power, the direction, the color, and the quality. So let's start with the first one. Let's talk about the power of the light. And when we say power, this is what we mean is how powerful is it? How much light is it putting out? How bright is that? So as you can see in my lovely mugshot up here, I've got a pretty powerful light going on, and so you can see me pretty well. If we increase that, you will notice that it gets brighter and brighter and brighter, and it gets actually overexposed, and it looks terrible. But what I'm seeing here, all I've changed is the brightness of the light. And if you look directly into the light, you can see that it's super bright and it's very powerful. And this is caused by moving the light closer to me. I've increased its power on the subject. So the light itself hasn't gotten any brighter, but the light being closer to me due to something called the inverse square law that I won't make you go into, makes it look brighter on me. So we've increased the power of the light, or the brightness. So that's the first thing. And that's kind of the obvious thing. You know, you look at the bulbs that are in your household, and they have a certain rating on them. So if you sort of remember back in the olden days when you had incandescent light bulbs, you'd have them in your house, they'd be 60 watts or 100 watts. And that wattage, this W here, is referring to the brightness of the bulb. And that was actually a direct electrical measurement back in the days of tungsten lights, which are the regular incandescent bulbs. Now we have a lot of fluorescent lights and compact fluorescents it's not an equivalent amount of electricity, actually, so wattage is not always the best way to measure this, but it's still sort of the standard. So when you see film lights, you'll see their power listed as wattage most of the time. So you'll see standards of, 300 watt lights, 1,000 watt lights, etc., etc. So when you see that W at the end, you know that it's measuring the brightness or the output of the light itself. So the next thing that you have after that is we have the direction of the light. And this matters because the way that the light is coming into our scene has a big impact on how we see it and what sort of assumptions that we make. So the direction of the light. Normally, we are used to seeing scenes and people lit from above, because we have the sun that sits above us, so this sort of looks normal. But you can also have light coming in from the side, and maybe when you see that you think, oh, well, maybe there's a window or a lamp over there. You can have it be very much in the front. That also feels sort of artificial, and it looks like I'm looking into something bright, especially if I get really close to it and it's like, oh my god, it's so bright, there's something amazing going on there. And if you want to go for that villainous look, a surefire way to do that is to put the light underneath the subject, because nobody is ever lit like this, and if they are, then they must be terrible and evil. Okay, so maybe that's a bit much, but you can see that changing the direction of the light does have a big impact on what the scene itself looks like. So direction is a very important consideration when you start thinking about where you're going to put your lights, obviously, and that matters sort of horizontally, vertically, how tall they are, what direction they're coming from, if they're from above or below. And so direction is sort of our number two property of light that we want to make sure that we're paying attention to. So the third quality of light that we want to pay attention to is the property called color. Now, you are all also obviously very familiar with the concept of color. You've been dealing with it since you were born. You've been playing with crayons probably all of your life, and you're probably taking color theory classes and stuff. So the color of light is obviously very important. We have to tell our camera what white is supposed to look like, so you're oftentimes dealing with issues of white balance, where you're trying to deal with indoor lighting being a different color than outdoor lighting. We measure color temperature with the Kelvin scale. So you'll see this degrees Kelvin, you'll see 3.2, which is 3,200 degrees Kelvin, or you'll see 5.6 or 5,600 degrees Kelvin. And that's the scale of warm light to bluish, coolish light. So what does this mean? The basic difference here is the difference between indoor and outdoor lighting. This used to be a lot more consistent back in the tungsten lighting days, but regular incandescent bulbs burn at this sort of orange color. The sun, being a much hotter surface of light, actually has a bluish cast, and our brains actually compensate for this, so we don't usually see this color cast, but you do when you start mixing sources of light, because your brain has to decide which one it's going to consider normal. So this comes up a lot when you start trying to match the lighting that you're using with the sun. So if you're shooting outside, you're going to have to correct the color of your lights, or else they'll look really orange. So I mean, obviously, if I'm gonna put a gel, this little piece of plastic, in front of the light that I've got here, and notice that my skin takes on a more healthy orange glow. Take it off, and I, got the full pale action that I normally have. So I'm just changing the color of light. I'm just putting that orange gel over the existing light. And similarly, I love the sound that makes. I can do the same thing with a blue gel, or any color gel. I could use green or red or whatever. These just happen to be handy. I've got a blue gel that I can put over the light here, and it sort of cools down the image a little bit. You can see these are kind of subtle differences. So changing the color of the light can be used sort of in an invisible way, where you're trying to match it so that it looks like outdoor light or looks like indoor light, or it can be used sort of in a creative way when you want to make like a crazy party color come on and have everything look pink. You can obviously do that as well. So color is the third aspect, the third property of light that we have to keep in mind. And usually this is determined by two things: either the type of bulb that you have installed in a particular light. We call them lamps in film parley. So the type of lamp, if it's an incandescent lamp, then it's going to be this 3.2K Kelvin color down on the sort of lower end of the spectrum. It's going to be warm. And sometimes we have lights called HMIs, or we have fluorescent lights that have daylight balanced tubes that are going to give you a nice 5.6 or something in that realm, so that it will match sunlight. So that's the nomenclature that you will see frequently in regards to color when it comes to lighting. And so the fourth quality, the final quality or property of light actually that we refer to, is actually the light's quality. And that sounds like a very subjective statement. So we're saying that a light is good or bad. It's not really that cut and dry. You're not choosing between like happy and sad or good or bad. That's not the case. What you're looking at is more along the lines of, is the light hard or is it soft? So what that does is it has a different effect on the subject. It creates different types and qualities of shadows, and there's applications in which you will want to use one or the other. So right now I'm using a soft light. This is a fluorescent light that has a soft feel to it, and I can make it even, I can as I bring it in, it sort of loses its softness quality. But as you look, the shadows that this casts, with my big hunkin' nose, is kind of a soft shadow. It's not a real harsh, dark line. If I sort of put it above me so that it casts shadows down on my face from my glasses. Again, those are very soft, and I get a sort of nice sort of defining shape with my face with that. So again, it has this feeling of softness to it. So bear with me here. I'm going to turn off the light. Oh my God, what happened? I'm going to turn on a hard light. This is an incandescent bulb. Now, if you'll notice, this casts darker shadows on my face. They don't have that nice fall off. They're harsher shadows, and when I put it out in front of me, it kind of isn't exactly, I don't know, it's not exactly nice to the face. So a lot of times you want to counteract the harshness of a light like this by using something called diffusion. So if I take this little piece of plastic gel called a diffusion, and I put it in front of that light, this is it without, this is it with diffusion, I get a little bit nicer of a look. It's a little bit softer versus super harsh. It's doing two things. It's cutting down the amount of light, but it's also making that light softer and making the shadows less harsh. They have more of a gradient to them rather than just straight up darkness. So that's the quality of light. Hard light, gonna be your... Let's try to keep it quiet on set. Hard, harsh light. Soft, fluorescent sort of light. And quality, is determined usually by sort of the size of the light. So the larger fluorescents are typically going to be softer. The reason that the diffusion makes a light like this softer is that it increases the surface area of the light. The diffusion becomes the light source at that point. So that's what drives the quality of a light. And remember, all the other properties of light, like its direction. I'm evil if it's below. I look pretty normal if it's above. And motivated lighting from different directions. It's like, oh, maybe I'm standing next to a window and maybe there's a light there, or maybe there's a lamp there. So that is lighting in a nutshell. 4 properties in the dark. 4 properties simply revised as such. Power or brightness. Direction. And remember that this is all based on our experience with light from the sun. So light looks sort of best from slightly above. Color, depending on sort of if it's an indoor or outdoor source, or if it's supposed to be something like police lights shining in from the outside. And quality. And remember that quality is all about the harshness of a light, whether it's hard or soft. So these 4 properties are the way that we describe lights, and we will take those into account every time that we're lighting a scene. We'll want to think about these because they will determine which lights we need, where we need to put them, and what kind of additional control we might want to put in terms of diffusion or color correction.